when you are a late bloomer and you're coming out, you can start to feel like you're a teenager. Hormones feel like they're raging. You're feeling these huge levels of desire and attraction, maybe that you've never experienced before. You're feeling distracted. You're feeling like, oh my gosh, like I want to be focusing all of my energy on this identity exploration and all these experiences that I'm having. At the same time, you're like, okay, I feel like a teen, but I have to manage all these adult responsibilities. This is rude. This is like literally homophobic. I hate this. Hello, and welcome to the Eva Bloom podcast. I'm your host, Eva Bloom, and I'm so excited that you're here. I'm a non-binary, queer, late bloomer coach and LGBTQIA+ sex ed speaker and community facilitator, and this is the Eva Bloom podcast, the show all about giving you knowledge and frameworks to help you understand coming out and developing confidence and joy in your queerness, as well as personal storytelling for me to help you feel a little bit less alone along the process. While I'm not helping and supporting late bloomers, you can find me reading a queer sci-fi or fantasy book, starting a new craft project, or playing board games with friends. You can expect new episodes of the Out and Bloom podcast every single week. Upcoming episodes on gender, labels, finding queer community, and more. So please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to have you. And if you want even more late bloomer community, you can join us at the Late Bloomer Support Club over at patreon.com/Late Bloomer Support Club. For $1 USD a month, you can get access to monthly calls that are themed around a different aspect of celebrating queer joy and the late bloomer journey, plus access to our Discord, which is open 24/7, sharing book recs, queer dating advice, solidarity, memes, all that great stuff. So we'd love to see you there. This week we are talking all about queer time and second adolescence, which if you are a late bloomer, you might be like, oh yeah, strap in, I'm ready to go. If you are unfamiliar with the concepts of queer time, it originates from Jack Halberstam, the queer and trans scholar, from an essay in 2005. And it really talks about the way that queer and trans people experience time differently. You know, our timelines, our life trajectory, oftentimes differently than cis and straight people. In the words of Doctor Who, you know, a little bit of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey of it all. It really focuses on the idea that queer and trans people experience time and different milestones in a different way than cishet people. So maybe we experience different milestones later in life or in like a circular, funky way. Definitely for me as a late bloomer lesbian, that looks like, you know, starting to date people of a gender that I'm actually attracted to into my adulthood for the first time, as opposed to having those first dating experiences as a tween or a kid or even, you know, an early adult, and feeling really connected to my tween self and my teen self in a kind of unique, wibbly wobbly time way now as an almost 30-year-old person. This is kind of in opposition to the idea of, get ready, we're going to say some funky scholarly words. This is in opposition to something like chromonormativity, which was coined by Elizabeth Freeman, the idea of time moving in a normative fashion set out by the cishet world, or something called the relationship escalator, which is a very popular term used in polyamory. This idea that our relationships have to move in a linear way, and there are different milestones dictated by cishet monogamous people that are celebrated, and we receive a lot of social status and celebration and pressure to follow through on these milestones on a specific timeline. That might look like, you know, you have a high school sweetheart and maybe like you get married to them, or you have a college sweetheart and, you know, as you're dating, you find the one and then you get married and then you get a house and then you have kids, etc., etc. And that there's this like escalating path. And if you're not, married by 30, maybe people are weird about it. And this idea that for a lot of different reasons, queer people and people who are queering ideas of relationships and life maybe don't experience timelines, whether that's relationship timelines or other timelines in life, getting a certain job by a certain time, having a certain level of like financial stability by a certain time, that doesn't always happen for us. And I really like this framework in the way that it is affirming. There are different reasons why queer people might experience time and life timelines differently, both in terms of very deep emotional reasons and very practical reasons that both are influenced by living in a queerphobic or a queer negative world. Whether that's growing up, a lot of queer people aren't able to be their full selves in childhood or being a teen or early adulthood or even into adulthood. So when we do come into our authenticity and do start living our full queer lives, we can feel like we're starting at the beginning or feel very connected to our earlier ages and getting to be a little bit messy and live beyond these prescribed boxes of what our lives is supposed to look like at different times and heal those inner child and inner teen and inner adulthood parts of ourselves at different ages. There are other really tangible, practical reasons why queer people might not be able to have even access to these different milestones at the same time as their cishet peers, whether that is getting disowned by your family at a young age and having to make your way out in the world by yourself, or literally not being able to have access to becoming a parent as a queer or trans person. Literally this week, Italy allowed 2 moms who had a kid through IVF for both of them to legally be their parents. So the world of, queer rights and access to different parts of life is still very much in progress. Even things like paying for transition, whether that is surgeries or hormones or even like clothes or all the different governmental documentation, that can be a financial burden that trans people are going to prioritize, which means that you might be able to do other things in life until a later date. For me, like I said, I feel that very much in terms of dating and relationships, starting to date people of the genders, that I'm attracted to as an adult can feel very jarring and frustrating and a whole lot of emotions that we'll talk more about in a little bit. Going on first queer dates at almost 30 when friends and people around me are getting married and having kids can feel like there's a huge gap or a huge chasm in terms of the way we are experiencing our life timelines or our life. Even when I, came out as a lesbian, wanting to be like, okay, I want to queer date, like in a casual way. I want to have lots of dating experiences, but I feel this pressure that because I'm at this stage in life, I should only be dating for a romantic relationship or for a life partner. When, for one, that's like, all of these timelines are BS. There is no right or wrong way to want to date or want to experience connection. But I definitely felt that pressure in terms of timelines and being on a queer time. And there being grief and frustration of, okay, when I realize that I'm a lesbian and want to casual date, it's in the middle of a pandemic. And there's all these like additional factors that I have to account for and will probably always have to account for when it comes to dating because the pandemic and COVID is not going away. And grief and frustration that I never got to experience queer dating to the fullest extent that I wanted to before this dramatic world shift happened. So just a little peek into like my own personal thoughts and experiences of queer time in that way. But a big part of queer time and this idea of second adolescence, which very much goes hand in hand, the idea that when you are a late bloomer and you're coming out, you can really start to feel like a teen. You can start to feel like you're a teenager. Hormones feel like they're raging. You're feeling these huge levels of desire and attraction, maybe that you've never experienced before. You're feeling distracted. You're feeling like, oh my gosh, like I want to be focusing all of my energy on this identity exploration and all these experiences that I'm having in your adulthood. So it's like a second adolescence. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I feel like a teen, but I have to manage all these adult responsibilities. This is rude. This is like literally homophobic. I hate this. But yeah, a big part of my understanding and the way that I really appreciate the frameworks of queer time and second adolescence is around healing and the way that you're so in touch with your inner child or your inner teen, that as you live your authentic queer life, as you explore, as you find queer joy, you are not only healing and giving that queer joy to yourself, you are literally like reaching back through time and giving a hug to your baby self. And healing and processing the emotions of second adolescence, if you intentionally connect with your younger self, can be a big way to do this. It's part of the reason that things like queer prom are so popular. The idea that a lot of queer folks couldn't go to our proms as our authentic selves, maybe in the clothes that we wanted to wear or with a partner that we wanted to bring. So getting to live a queer prom experience as an adulthood after you have come into your queerness can be really beautiful and healing. Even something like Dylan Mulvaney's Days of Girlhood is such a beautiful example of healing through second adolescence and queer time, of reconnecting with the girl, like younger, like teenager Dylan, who didn't get to live out her days of girlhood as that age, and giving space for those little parts of yourself to be healed and go on this journey with you. And there are lots of ways to heal that inner child version of you and your current version of you. Some of my friends will sometimes tease me about how much I love reading YA, even like middle grade. Shout out to Molly Ostertag, and making like fantasy queer graphic novels for middle grades. I eat them up. But it really is about healing as much as it is about fun, of getting to read these stories of an out, sapphic teen living their lives and like having early experiences and making mistakes, or even just watching like a movie like Crush, where it's in an alternate universe where there are a bunch of sapphic girls at your high school, is really healing to be like, whoa, that is what it could have been like, and kind of living through that vicariously. Even something like Dungeons and Dragons or another role-playing game can be really powerful and healing, because you get to create a character. Literally, Allie Beardsley's character, Kristen Appleby's in Dimension 20's Fantasy High, was inspired by their own journey as a lesbian coming out in a religious environment. And you can play a character who is younger and get to like role play and improv those moments of queer connection that you wish you'd had at a young age. So yeah, some tools for inner child healing around second adolescence. There are so many different feelings that come up as we navigate second adolescence and queer time. Of course, there can be joy, excitement, overwhelm, nervousness, like all of that stuff, and some really like intense emotions of envy or jealousy at younger queer people who maybe had more representation that we did. Maybe they grew up in like a less queer-phobic world. They were able to access these parts of themselves or live their true selves more fully than we got to, which is really hard, because of course you're like, I want younger people to be able to experience themselves. I want queer people to not have to hide or feel pain. But you also feel like, fuck, like, I wish that was me. Don't you wish that was you? Yeah, I absolutely do wish that was me. Even like anger for having to suppress certain parts of yourself, that anger that you were made to hate parts of yourself, anger that you had to experience queer or transphobic violence, and then sadness and despair that you can't get that time back. and that the only way through is forward, and feeling sad for yourself and like the pain that you experienced growing up as a youth or in your adulthood. And of course, grief. I don't think we can talk about second adolescence and queer time without talking about grief, without talking about grieving the time that we lost, not being able to be ourselves or not having all the information about ourselves, not having a safe enough space to understand those things about ourselves or to explore ourselves, grieving that you could have grown up in a different time, that you could have had different experiences, grieving an alternate version of yourself that like didn't have to feel that kind of shame or disconnection or pain, even like feeling behind and grieving a version of your life that you thought that you were going to have, especially if you navigated a lot of compet as a late bloomer and you really imagined a straight life for yourself, and grieving a loss of maybe that sense of security or stability that that life would have given you. That you're like, okay, I'm just going to plug in. I know what my life is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because I'm just following this prescribed script. I know that that's going to give me community support and that I will have seen 5 million models of what that life looks like. So I will have a security in knowing what that looks like. And then to have that shift and grieving losing those things that would have been really nice, and even having a different vision of your adulthood of like, okay, I thought I'd done all of my like messy exploration in my teens and 20s. No, okay, my 30s and 40s continue to be a place where I don't have the answers and I do still feel like I'm figuring things out. And, humans are really silly and we do the thing where we feel bad about like a challenging emotion. So I think a lot of folks can feel shame about our grief or can feel like guilty about our grief and like minimize it and be like, oh, but like I didn't have it that bad, or I have like this amount of community support, or like I do have a partner now, so I shouldn't feel grief about the time that I had lost or the timeline that I'm on now in terms of coming into my queerness and my adulthood. But I want to affirm that your grief is valid and you have every right to feel it and honor it and have it be part of your journey, no matter what your queer journey has looked like. Really like recognizing what wounds are you carrying from growing up in an anti-queer world, whether that's like explicit things that people said or a lack of representation, a lack of affirmation, and being able to tend to those. So many things can coexist at once. We can grow up in a very privileged place in terms of there being other parts of the world that are more violent towards queer people, and all of us are still living in an anti-queer world. So we can honor that experience, that like shared trauma and pain that we've gotten to, and know that we're also part of a collective healing, not just like a collective trauma, but also we're all healing together and we're not alone in that pursuit of queer joy and connection. For me, one of the areas where I feel like I experienced a lot of queer time, second adolescent grief at the beginning of my re-coming out journey was around friendships, looking around other people who had really long-lasting friendships and feeling sad and grief that even though I had a lot of queer people around me at all stages of my life, I wasn't at a place to be understanding who I was or fully authentic in those relationships. So there was always an element of like disconnect and loneliness and feeling grief and sadness and frustration at the years lost of deep, meaningful friendships in like a deeper way if I had been able to be out to myself and feeling like, okay, I am fully an adult learning how to have friendships. Love that. Really giving myself compassion around the idea that friendships, like relationships, I feel like we have this script that they are somehow intuitive or easy for everybody, or everybody has a big friend group. And that is not true. Friends are hard for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And I was not alone, am not alone, you are not alone if you are learning how to have friendships in adulthood or at any stage of your life. And friendships are part of what gives life meaning and beauty, and they are really worth learning how to have at any stage and being a beginner and making mistakes as you figure it out. Something that I've, been inspired by from literally the Second Adolescence podcast hosted by Adam James Cohen, which I highly recommend that you listen to if you are listening to this podcast. But one of the things that he says is that you are healing your younger version of yourself just by being who you are. That that if young version of you had seen current version of you being their queer self, that it would have meant literally the world. It would have been brain chemistry altering. So you are healing yourself, past you, and also, the queer collective just by existing in your authentic self. And if I think about that too much, I'm gonna cry, and that's okay. As I mentioned, it's incredibly valuable, essential, and important to learn how to make friends and be in a relationship with one another. It's also gonna be messy. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna do it imperfectly. You're gonna be figuring it out. And one of the frameworks, again from Adam James Cohen, shout out, is this idea of necessaries, which is messy, necessary experiences on your late bloomer journey. So whether that is, romantic sexually or in other areas of your life, that for all of my recovering perfectionists, of which I am sure there are many, sound off in the comments, in the YouTube, wherever. And then if you want to have a real good look in the mirror about why that is, go and watch the Compound episode. But for many of us recovering perfectionists, this can be really hard. It can be so hard to be like, okay, as an adult, I have to be a beginner, or just period, I have to be a beginner at something. There's an option, especially when it comes to queer dating. Maybe if you've dated a lot of cishet men in the past, you're like, cool, I'm looking at an option of dating men where I know exactly what to do. I know what tricks, I know how to flirt with men easily, I know how to perform in the bedroom, like being rejected by them doesn't hurt. Easy money, could do that. Doesn't involve any challenging of myself. Or I could be a beginner. I could be awkward. I could be rejected. I could not know what's going on. Hate that. Hate that. Don't want to do that. So flipping the script that it's actually necessary. I don't love the ideas of like paying your dues, but it is kind of like, okay, it's the tax. I gotta do my bit. I have to they need it from me. They need a certain number of awkward experiences and then I pass go. Thinking about it like that can feel affirming to be like, oh, it's actually necessary. I need that as part of my healing for things to start to make sense and for things to integrate. I need to learn from my mistakes. Yeah, I feel like I've had a lot of necessaries. I am in a very beautiful relationship now. Most of my queer dating experiences at the beginning, very, trash fire. Trash fire? Wouldn't recommend them to people. And I think that's the experience of a lot of folks. And, I'm also really proud of myself that I had all of those very chaotic, messy, early queer dating experiences and then still went on to, before I ever met my partner, to encourage other people to be like, queer dating is beautiful. It's worth it. There's joy. Don't be scared. Another necessary that I feel like I experienced was around queer style. There was, a period where I really resonated with queer masculinity and wanted to dress in a very queer masculine way. And fun fact, nobody teaches you how to do that. There's no magazines growing up about how to do that, especially if you are not thin and short. You're really on your own and trying to figure out how that happens. So I feel like I had a lot of moments where I was like, why do I look like a divorced dad instead of a hot queer? What? And I would look at my friends who'd been dressing masculinely for 5-10 years. And I'm like, why do I look like that? And I was like, because they've had 10 years of practice of figuring it out. And you just got here. So you're going to start kind of looking like how they looked when they're just figuring it out. And that's okay. And that's okay. Me to me and you to you. I'll also put some, resources in the description if you want some resources on mask dressing because it's hard to find education. And I found some, even if I don't necessarily dress super mask today, I'm grateful for that knowledge that I gained in making it through the necessary of it all. As I said, queer dating as a newbie, as a late bloomer, as part of your queer time or second adolescent journey can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to experience like authentic attraction, maybe for the first time, or get to actually act on authentic attraction for the first time, mutual authentic attraction, experiencing love and care in a queer dynamic. Whoa, that's wild. That'll do stuff to your brain. Flirting, like it all can feel so intense. The way that teen dating can feel, there can be a lot of awkwardness, like just a learning curve. Allowing yourself to experience that desire without shame is a beautiful process that can take time. Learning how to queer date is literally different than learning how to straight date. It's not just as simple as like changing the gender that you're looking for on a dating app. It is a whole paradigm shift of like, okay, how do I find spaces where there are people who are 30, 40 plus? Like, how do I create a profile that vibes? Like, how do I approach? And I do think that it takes time and like building those networks, and it is much more fluid and friendship based and in person than straight dating, just because of the numbers. So that is like a process that can take time. Like I said, my first few queer dating experiences, maybe not ideal. And I know I certainly ignored a lot of red flags because I was in many ways like so desperate for connection and affirmation from other queer people and validation. So it can take time to be like, okay, let me affirm this within myself and give myself space. Welcome to our segment, What I'm Loving Right Now, where I share you all of my favorite things that I am reading right now, I'm listening to, I'm cooking, and creators that I love and I'm obsessed with. So starting off with what I'm reading, I have been in a little bit of a reading slump. I've read a lot less books in 2025 than I have in the past 3-4 years, but I have been reading a lot of nonfiction. But this is a fiction book that has got me out of my fiction slump, and it is Love and Focus by Lila Lee. And it is so cute. It's truly like the sweetest, cutest, fluffiest little sapphic romance that I've read in a while. It's the perfect beach read if you're like, no thoughts, just two little hotties being in love with each other, but in denial that they're in love with each other. I love it. I had a huge crush on both of the characters, and that's really a huge win when it comes to any romance you're reading. I love Lila Lee. Her book, I'll Be the One, is one of my all-time favorite sapphic books. So yeah, I was so excited to get a little arc of this. In terms of what I'm listening to, I've been absolutely obsessed with Molly Grace, and her new song, Heaven Sent, just came out. And I have been in the kitchen, and I will continue to be singing it in my room every time. It really heals me as somebody who grew up going to church. It is not the type of church that I grew up in, but it still tickles me. And it's basically a celebration gospel anthem about the joys of queer love and intimacy called Heaven Sent. And the music video is also gorgeous. And I'm just so happy to have a fat, curvy, pop lesbian girly. Oh, really, there's nothing better. Who also has the pipes of an angel, Molly Grace. You rock. In terms of what I'm cooking, it's spring going into summer, and I've been loving some little snap peas, doing a little blanch on the snap peas, get the texture just right. It's wonderful, it's perfect. Making a little pasta salads. Woohoo! I would just want to start growing our garden and getting some herbs so I can use fresh herbs for the pasta salads all summer. Yes. One of my favorite creators that I've been loving is Jordan Myrick, who you might know from Dropout.tv's Gastronauts or The Mythical Morning universe. She's so cool. She makes the most wonderful food content, sharing little like food that she's eating around Los Angeles with her partner Kendall. They also have a podcast together called Happy Wife, Happy Life. As a lesbian who loves food content, I'm happy. I love their series where they do their best bites of the month. So cool. Love it. Absolutely love it. A reminder to submit your questions to Ask Eva. They can be anonymous, or you can have your name, and I will answer any of your questions about late bloomer life, coming out, dating, books, all of that good stuff. That being said, thank you so much for listening and watching to this episode of Out in Bloom. If you liked it, please feel free to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Rate this podcast 5 stars. Do it. You're not doing anything else. Give some love to some queer media, some sapphic media out into the world. If you yourself are a queer late bloomer dating newbie this summer and you want to know how to do that, feel a little bit more confident, affirmed, I just released the webinar version, all recordings, you can watch at any time, of my most wonderful dating course, Spicy Sapphic Summer. So you can get that over at evabloom.ca/sapphic-summer. For a reduced price, you can listen and watch it at your own pace, recordings in any time zone, and get all the information about queer dating, flirting, intimacy, communication, dating dynamics, literally everything that you could want when it comes to sapphic dating as a newbie. Again, if you want more queer community and connection, join the Late Bloomer Support Club. It's truly a joy. We do monthly calls as well as a Discord over at patreon.com/Late Bloomer Support Club. But that's all for me. Stay curious, stay blooming, and I'll see you in the next episode.